Good evening. My name is Sophia Perrone, and I am a student project manager at the Clark Forum for Contemporary Issues at Dickinson College. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that Dickinson College is on the unceded lands of the Susquehannock Nation. We acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples who have lived with these lands, as well as the thousands of Indigenous children forced into the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in 1879 as a part of a federal cultural eradication effort. On behalf of the Clark Forum, Dickinson College, Departments of Spanish and Portuguese Studies, and Latin American, Latinx, and Caribbean Studies, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event, Political Prisoners and Free Speech in Cuba. This event is part of the Clark Forum's Leadership in an Age of Uncertainty series. Growing up as a military child, I lived overseas for many years. I have been to 22 countries so far, and none have handled freedom of expression exactly the same way. Seeing firsthand the varying scale of freedom of expression, I gained a greater understanding of my own rights. Coming from a country with the self-proclaimed nickname, the Land of the Free, it can be a challenge to imagine the stark contrast of life in places where freedom of speech is restricted. Opportunities to hear from speakers like Jorge and Nancy provide us with the opportunity to better understand the personal impacts of restrictive laws, and in turn increase our appreciation of our own rights. The Cuban Black Spring was a peaceful political protest which evoked an extreme response from the Cuban government. Out of roughly 100 activists and journalists who were protesting, 75 were arrested and faced criminal charges. The Ladies in White, or Damas de Blancas movement, was founded in response to this mass arrest. Family members of those imprisoned gathered week after week to peacefully urge for the release of the Black Spring prisoners. Nancy Alfaya Hernandez was one of the founding members of the Ladies in White movement, and Jorge Oliviera Castillo was one of the prisoners freed as a result of their efforts. Jorge Oliviera Castillo is a Cuban writer and a well-known dissident. He has written multiple books, including 6 books of poetry and 2 collections of short stories. He has recently published another book of poetry and a 3rd collection of short stories, which are inspired by his experiences as a soldier in the jungle during the Angolan Civil War. His wife, Nancy Alfaya Hernandez, is an activist and an artist. In addition to her role in the Ladies in White movement, she served as a community project leader for Mujer no dejes tu lugar, which translates to Woman, Don't Leave Your Place, and worked as coordinator for the Women's Network for Equality with the Citizen Committee for Racial Integration. Jorge and Nancy are currently in residence at the City of Asylum, Pittsburgh. The Clark Forum acknowledges that Hurricane Ian left Cuba in a catastrophic state. If you are interested in making a donation, please use the QR codes on the screen behind me to connect to relief organizations. There will be a question and answer period immediately following the program, so please hold all questions until then. The Clark Forum welcomes differences of opinion expressed politely, thoughtfully, and succinctly. Disruptive behavior or harassment of the speakers, members of the Dickinson community, or audience members will not be tolerated. As a show for respect for our speakers and everyone in attendance, please stay until the end of the program, including the question and answer session. For students interested in participating in the Passport program, scan the QR code on the back of your program to track your attendance through Engaged. For more information on the Passport program, please take a passport with you as you exit the auditorium. In the event of an emergency, accessible exits are located on the west side of the building. If you are interested in hearing more about Jorge's poems, he will present a poetry reading tomorrow in the Stafford Reading Room from noon to 1 in the Widener Spar Library. At this time, I now ask you to silence all cell phones and other electronic devices. And now, please join me in welcoming our guests, Jorge Oliviera Castillo and Nancy Alfaya Hernandez.
It's a great pleasure to be here. First, I want to appreciate this invitation. It's another opportunity to share some stages our life we consider very important as human rights defenders. In my case, as independent journalists. First, I can show you the map of Cuba. It's very close to the United States, only 90 miles. For that, so many Cubans live in the Florida state. Many of them have escaped from the dictatorship during more than 60 years. Some of them claim for their relative and others fleeing by raft or lately crossing borders from Nicaragua to the United States border with Mexico. It's been a steady exodus since 1959. My wife and I, we grew up in this municipality in the capital of Cuba, Habana Vieja. It's visited for many tourists every year. It's one of the largest municipality of the Cuban capital. And this view are from the Cuban capital. It's a very old building. It's a very common landscape on the Cuban, old Cuban, but this was taken in the capital. The saddest of these views is so many people lose their life under ruins. So many people die, unfortunately, every year. Every week, many buildings fall down in different parts of the capital of Cuba. And this is other buildings very close to our place we live in Cuba. It's very close to the building where we live in Cuba. This is a picture brings me good memories because in this school I studied 4 years in this school and graduate and as a communications technicians in 1982. It's relatively very close to my house. This picture is very important for me because after I graduated from this school, I was recruited and the military service in Cuba is mandatory for men. I was sent to Angola jungle, an African jungle. It was a very difficult stage in my life because I have to survive 26 months on the ground, all the time surrounded by wild animals, and in the risk to die at any moment. It was very difficult for me. The travel was in the cargo ship. I was crossing the Atlantic Ocean during 17 days. It was terrible. We were going to in the holds of the cargo ship. We were around 2,000 soldiers distributed in 4 holds. We traveled overcrowded, without bathing, and without able to go to the deck either. You can see the long distance between Cuba and Angola. Angola it was 17 days crossing the sea. The other side, you can see the T-34 tank. I received training as this kind of this kind of the armament of this armored equipment. We live on the ground because when the way for protection, but the bombs for the airplane, for the mainly. But it was very difficult for me. And 7 months ago, I finished to write a book about that experiences, those experiences. This book is unpublished yet, but I hope to able to publish next year. It's very important for me, this book. I had written articles about this experience, but I wanted to write literature, specifically short story. I write only poetry and short story. This book is very important for me. When I returned, I was 26 months in surviving in Angola jungle. After that, I returned to Cuba. I returned to Cuba, and I received training as editor of television. I worked 10 years in this institute, official institute, the Cuban television. At the beginning, I thought that I had a good job, but as time went by, I realized I was wrong because I had to make fake news every day, according to the point of view of the ideologies of the Communist Party. And I realized the Cuban Revolution was not that I thought. I was disappointed for that. But I have feared to say my truth, because in Cuba it's very risky to say the truth. For that reason, many people are in prison now. In this moment, in Cuba, there are more 1,000 political prisoners. According to current report, Cuba is one of the countries that I have the most largest people in prison. It's unfortunately, it's the truth. And finally, I was 10 years working there, but finally I tried to escape from Cuba by raft. But I was captured by Cuban Guard Coast, and 12 miles from Cuban coast. For that reason, I was demoted, and I lost my work as editor. Finally, in 1993, I became a dissident. I decided to break all relationship with the Cuban official institution. I knew the consequences that I faced, but I didn't matter because I decided to say my truth because the most Cuban people have double. They have apparently to show and support to the Communist Party, but after that, they say that they share they are true with their friends, with their family. It's easy. I think so many people, I think to understand how is the Cuban system is, I recommend you to read the very important book, written in 1948 by George Orwell. The name of this book is 1984. It's very important. When you read this book, you understand what happened inside Cuba. Well, finally, I tried to escape from Cuba, and the raft similar of this one. And in 1992, this is in my house. This picture is in my house, writing an article about the Cuban reality. When I become an independent journalist, and this moment to begin the repressals by the political police. I was arrested several times. I faced a repudiation act, so many people yelling in front of my house. And finally, I was arrested and sentenced on 18 years in prison. This picture is in the Cuba Black Spring. It's the crackdown happened in March 2003, and 75 dissidents were arrested on March 18, 19, and 20. And all of them, among them me, we were sentenced a long time in prison. In my case, I was sentenced 18 years in prison. I was sent on the Guantanamo prison. I would like to clear this Guantanamo. When so many people listen to Guantanamo, so many people think it's Guantanamo, the United States side, but no. I live in Havana. I was taken to Guantanamo prison more than 800 miles to my house. It was terrible there. It's a big prison in the Cuban side, the Guantanamo. I was there in solitary confinement, 9 months. 9 months in solitary confinement. And I was in 3 different prisons, but the most of time as political prisoner was in Guantanamo prison. This is a picture, is a campaign. Several international organizations, such as Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Reporters Without Borders, made a very strong campaign to demand our freedom. This is my picture. Of course, I was younger. Unfortunately, because of this campaign, I want to highlight something. Is that I think I was released from prison because of these campaigns. These campaigns also demanded our relatives in the streets, and especially the ladies in white. It's an organization founded for our relatives, mainly the women members of our family, founded this organization. This organization was going to the street to demand our freedom. And they were arrested, beaten for the governmental forces, but she kept, you are the man there, you are the man. It was very important for our freedom. This is the United States Embassy painted in 75, and it's other things, solidarity with us. The United States Embassy, we were supported by them and the others, diplomatic and European embassy too. I think that this picture is very important. These points, red points and green points, is the old prison in Cuba and labor camps. According to recent current report, Cuba is one of the country who has more people behind bars, a fifth country around the world. I was in Havana, in Guantanamo prison, here. Cuba, I can say that Cuba is a prison island. It's a totalitarian regime. It has, I told you, we have now more than 1,000 political prisoners. This book is very important for me. The most poems appear in this book I wrote in solitary confinement in Guantanamo prison. Confesiones ante el crepúsculo. Confession before the sunset. It's a very important book. I feel a very special love for this book. It was my first book, my first poetry book. And then I used the poetry to escape from my difficult circumstances. Because it's not easy to be in the solitary confinement. My cell was 3 meters long and 2 meters wide. I had to eat food, rotten food every day, and drink unclean water every time. It was difficult. For that, this book is very special for me. This is a song of my books. This book, Huésped del Infierno, Guest in Hell, in this book appear my experiences as a political prisoner. This book was published in Spain in 2007. And this survived in the Wolf Mouse was published in Spain. This short story book published in Argentina. Over there is my poetry books published in Czech Republic and translated to Czech and Spanish. This book was poetry books was published in Polish, and Spanish. This is the last book that I published in Miami in 2015. But it's a very important book for me. Guest in Hell. Now I would like to share with you some of my poems. I love the short poems. It's very difficult for me to write long poems. I like to give my message through the few words, word economy. And this is the title of these poems is Totalitarismo. La noche cuando es eterna duele como una herida de cuchillo recién afilado. La cuestión es aprender a sobrevivir sin el mágico ritual del alba. Un solo golpe. Siempre estoy dispuesto a recibir un golpe contundente, a mano limpia, directo al mentón o en el lado más vulnerable del abdomen. Pido públicamente ese golpe rotundo de la suerte. Mar abierto. Temo un inminente ahogamiento por inmersión. Estoy tratando de flotar en un mar de lágrimas y no sé nadar. Entre la suerte y el milagro, la esperanza ha madurado, está a punto de desprenderse de la rama. Las palmas de mis manos aguardan con la certeza del éxito. No le temo a los golpes de aire ni al agotamiento provocado por la incómoda postura. Espero pacientemente, sin pensar demasiado, en que la vez anterior, la lozanía de la corteza era el disfraz de la podredumbre. This is views on the repression in Cuba. This is activists when in the moment they were detained by political police in 2019. This is a demonstration to support the LGBTQ community. It's unfortunately, but it's a common landscape, common views in Cuba. Every day, so many people are arrested and taken to prison. I remember when in my trial, before my trial, I was arrested in 2003. I was taken to a political police headquarters. I was there 36 days in solitary confinement under heavy interrogation. And I remember I just talked with my lawyer 5 minutes before trial. It was a mockery trial. I knew my destiny was prison. I didn't know I would be sent to Guantanamo, but it was. And this picture is the same day, was taken the same day. This is an international reporter. I don't know, remember what press agency, international press agency, and the other one is independent journalist. He is in prison now. He received a sentence to be 10 years in prison. Is unfortunately. Well, as this way I finish my speech, and I have to invite now to my wife to talk to share with you about your experiences as a human rights defender, especially a women rights defender. Thank you so much.
Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Saludos a todos. Primeramente quiero dar gracias a Dios y al colectivo Dickinson College por la oportunidad
I'd like to thank Dickinson College for this opportunity
de poder compartir con ustedes nuestras experiencias como activistas y defensores de los derechos humanos.
for the opportunity to be able to share our experiences as activists.
Primeramente quiero presentar esta breve exposición con una pregunta. ¿Quiénes son las damas de blanco?
I'd like to start first with the question, who are the ladies in white?
Las damas de blanco son mujeres que surgieron en un momento difícil cuando los familiares nuestros fueron arrestados en la ola represiva de la Primavera Negra.
The ladies in white appeared in a very difficult moment when our family members were being arrested.
Mujeres, todas, hermanas, madres, hijas, nos unimos para protestar pacíficamente por esta flagrante violación que estaban cometiendo con ellos.
All women, mothers, daughters, sisters came together to protest for this flagrant violation of basic human rights.
Tomamos la decisión de ser la voz de los que no tenían voz y visibilizar al mundo de forma pacífica, manifestándonos en las calles, haciendo marchas pacíficas para visibilizar esta violación.
We decided we wanted to be the voice of the voiceless and to demonstrate peacefully in the streets.
Esta fue de las actividades que empezamos a hacer cívicamente, esta fue la primera. Vestidas todas de blanco.
This was our first demonstration, all of us dressed in white.
El blanco para nosotros representa la justicia y la paz.
White representing for us justice and peace.
Con un gladiolo en la mano.
With a gladiola in a hand.
Una flor de gladiolo. Flor.
Right, the flower.
Gladiolo. Gladiolo.
Yeah, gladiola in our
Yeah.
in the right hand.
Sí, escogimos esta flor porque esta flor representa el amor, la victoria, la fuerza interna y también la integridad moral.
This is a flower that represents love, freedom,
Fuerza interna.
and internal strength.
Y conociendo la historia de que en la época de gladiadores, cuando ganaban las batallas, les obsequiaban gladiolos.
¿Eso otra vez? Dilo otra vez.
En la época de los gladiadores, cuando ellos iban a las guerras y ganaban las batallas, les obsequiaban con gladiolos.
When gladiators went to war, they would, after their victories, would be given a gladiola.
Para nosotros era una batalla ganada salir a las calles a protestar por nuestros seres queridos que estaban prisioneros.
For us to just be out on the street in defense of our family members who were imprisoned was a victory.
Este símbolo quiere decir libertad. Es la L en el abecedario español.
That gesture of the L shape with our left hand is symbolizing liberty, freedom.
Estas marchas ocasionaron que la policía política nos reprimiera, nos hostigara, sobre todo con actos de repudio.
Our demonstrations resulted in the political police harassing us and repressing us with acts of repudiation.
Aquí podemos ver mujeres de la Policía Nacional Revolucionaria, que son las vestidas de azul.
You can see there the women dressed in the bluish-gray uniforms are of the Revolutionary Police.
Y las vestidas de verde son las del Ministerio del Interior.
And the women dressed in the green uniforms are from the Ministry of the Interior.
Esta es otra de las violencias que cometían contra nosotros. Nos llevaban a unos bus para ir a diferentes unidades policiales y ahí éramos interrogados.
You can see in this image an arrest where we would be put into police buses and taken to different police stations for questioning.
Laura Poyan fue la líder nuestra de las Damas de Blanco desde el inicio del movimiento y falleció en el 2011 producto, bueno.
This is, you can see here, Laura Poyan, who is the first leader of the movement and who passed away in 2011.
La presión psicológica de todas estas torturas que comete la seguridad del Estado ocasionó en ella diversas enfermedades.
All of the psychological pressure and torture that she received from the political police caused her all kinds of illnesses.
Y cuando ingresó, no salió del hospital.
She was hospitalized and never got out.
Aquí podemos mostrar otras imágenes con la represión en diversos años, lo veremos hasta la fecha actual.
You can see here different images of police repression in different acts leading up to the present.
Podemos ver también ciudadanos vestidos de civil, y estos son brigadas que organiza la revolución.
So you can also see non-uniformed people who are actually part of rapid response brigades organized by the government.
Para decir que es el pueblo indignado contra las mujeres que nos consideran contrarrevolucionarias, mercenarias y pagadas por el imperio.
This is to create the image that the people are against the ladies in white who have been designated as counter-revolutionaries.
Pueden ver que somos mujeres pacíficas y realmente la violencia es brutal.
You can see that the demonstrators are peaceful women and the violence against them is brutal.
Aquí, por ejemplo, uno de los letreros que tienen los que están en este movimiento del gobierno dice: todos marchamos por la revolución.
And one of the women is wearing a T-shirt that says, "We all march for the revolution."
Hay un lema en Cuba que dice: con la revolución todo, sin la revolución nada.
There's a saying in Cuba, with the revolution, everything; against the revolution, nothing.
Esto eran otra de las acciones cívicas que hacíamos nosotras que se llaman té literario.
This is another one of our civic actions that we had. We called them literary teas.
Aquí nos reuníamos en el marco de todos los meses del 18 al 20, que fue cuando se desencadenó la primavera negra de los arrestos.
Between the 18th and 20th of every month, we would get together, and on those dates, representing the days of the Black Spring in 2003.
El origen de estos té, el objetivo más bien de estos té era primeramente entre nosotras organizarnos, trazar estrategias.
The goal of these meetings was for us to be able to get together and strategize.
Y leer también las cartas de nuestros esposos que nos enviaban con poemas y también denuncias.
And also to read the letters that we were receiving from our imprisoned husbands, and also to share denunciations that they were making.
Esta es la casa de Laura Poyan, la que comenzó a darnos apertura en su hogar para estos té literarios.
This is an image at Laura Poyan's home where these meetings began.
Y ustedes pueden ver que ella está, que abrió la puerta estaba cerrada, la abrió y se está mirando que hay personas fuera.
You can see that the door is open and that she's looking outwards.
Esas personas son estos grupos de la seguridad del Estado, estas brigadas que organizan para hacer actos de repudio.
And who she's looking at, people from state security who've organized an act of repudiation to try and discredit the group.
Quiere decir que en tu propia casa tampoco tienes libertad. Sí, que en tu propia casa tampoco tienes libertad. Hasta ahí llegan violentamente. Podemos ver aquí las imágenes.
So the
Cómo
point,
te sacan de la casa y esto es lo que sucede.
the point being that you don't even have freedom in your own home, and it gets to the point where you're pulled out of your home violently.
Actualmente, Berta Soler es la que está al frente de las Damas de Blanco después que falleció Laura Poyan.
Currently, Berta Soler is the leader of the Ladies in White after the passing of Laura Poyan.
Y podemos ver, quise hacer un resumen porque serían muchísimas fotos, y podemos ver, por ejemplo, esto fue en el 2011, ella comenzó en el 2011, pero podemos ver ya la fecha del 2021 al 2022. Quiere decir que hasta la actualidad continúa la represión.
So this is just a summary of images to show you this has been going on for quite a time, right up to the present.
Quisiera señalar que en el 2016 las Damas de Blanco no pudimos marchar más en las calles. En el 2016.
I want to point out that in 2016 we could no longer march in the streets.
La policía política usó otro de los mecanismos de represión y es cercar las casas, primeramente la sede, que es la casa de Berta Soler, para que no pudiéramos salir a las calles.
The political police started to use a technique where they would surround the homes of the ladies in white, starting with Berta Soler's home, so that they could not even leave their home.
Y eso lo hacen con todas las mujeres que intentan salir cada domingo a manifestarse.
And they were doing this with all of the ladies in white who would want to march each Sunday, but their home would be surrounded and they couldn't get out of their home.
Las damas de blanco deciden no quedarse dentro de la casa porque tenemos una frase: la casa no es calabozo.
The ladies in white, we decided that we would not stay in our homes, and we have a saying that our home is not a jail.
Y al salir, esto es lo que sucede, vuelven a ver la policía, las mujeres de la Policía Nacional Revolucionaria y del Ministerio del Interior arrestando a las damas.
And when we leave our house, this is what you can see. We'd be surrounded by the police and accosted.
Esto sucede todos los domingos.
This happens every Sunday.
Ustedes pueden chequear en Google y pueden poner incluso el nombre Berta Soler y pueden ver hasta videos de cómo se la llevan arrestada.
You can Google it, you can Google Berta Soler, and you can see these images and videos of what's happening.
Quisiera también aportar un poquito con relación a un proyecto que seguí también a partir del 2007.
I'd also like to share a little bit with you about another project I started to participate in beginning in 2007.
Porque como dama de blanco nosotros tenemos la demanda de exigir la libertad de todos los presos políticos.
Like the ladies in white, we demand that all political prisoners be released.
Pero no me quise quedar solamente en ese marco que aún defiendo.
Although I defend that, of course, I didn't want to stay limited to that framework.
Como activista reprimida, como mujer, también me enfoqué en defender los derechos de las mujeres.
As a repressed woman and activist, I also wanted to defend women's rights.
Sobre todo la violencia de género y la violencia política contra las mujeres.
Especially gender violence and political violence against women.
Este proyecto comunitario que nació en mi barrio,
This is a community project that began in my neighborhood.
Lo hacíamos en diferentes casas
We would get together in different homes,
y tiene la misión de reflejar los diferentes ciclos de violencia de género que sufren las mujeres.
and it wants to reflect the different cycles of violence suffered by women.
Violencia política, violencia doméstica, violencia religiosa,
Domestic violence, religious violence, political violence,
y otros tipos de violencia.
and other kinds of violence as well.
Este proyecto social también sufrió consecuencias con represión.
This social project also had consequences of repression, suffered repression.
Por ejemplo, esta joven, ella tiene una discapacidad
For example, this young woman on the left who has a disability,
y ella nos abrió el espacio de su casa para hacer estos encuentros.
she opened her home to us to have these meetings.
Y fue amenazada por la policía política
She was then threatened by the political police.
que si yo continuaba visitando su casa,
If I were to keep going to her home,
ella podía ser procesada.
she could be processed.
Este trabajo me unió también a otros proyectos que luchan por la libertad de expresión, la libertad artística.
This work also led me into other projects dealing with artistic freedom and political freedom.
Y actualmente continúo trabajando, por ejemplo, con este proyecto que se llama Puente a la Vista.
Currently, I continue to work on this project, Puente a la Vista.
Puente a la Vista es una plataforma que promueve y defiende la libertad de expresión, la libertad artística, de escritores, artistas, activistas.
Puente a la Vista is a platform that defends freedom of expression and artistic freedom for artists and writers.
Y también promueve las obras que son censuradas de los escritores en Cuba.
Also supports works that are censored in Cuba.
Actualmente el proyecto Puente a la Vista amplió el trabajo con los presos políticos con ayuda humanitaria.
Right now, we are widening our work with political prisoners.
Que soy parte de este trabajo que estamos haciendo ahora mismo en Cuba.
And right now, I'm a part of this work that we're doing in Cuba.
Yo pude conectar con ellos cuando nosotros cuando fuimos invitados aquí por primera vez por la Universidad de Harvard, y a partir de ahí, desde aquí mismo desde Estados Unidos, comencé a trabajar con Puente a la Vista.
I was able to connect with this project when we came to the United States for the first time, invited by Harvard University, and since then I've been involved with that project.
Puente a la Vista organiza también unos festivales cada año que se llama Festival Vista.
We also organize an annual festival known as Festival Vista.
Sí, y ahí se promueven las obras de los escritores cubanos que no pueden ser, que son censuradas en Cuba.
And we promote in that festival the work of writers who are censored in Cuba.
La otra fotografía, imagen que pueden ver fue en Cuba también en una actividad en la Embajada Checa.
The image on the right is of an activity that we did at the Czech embassy in
Que nos
Cuba.
daba, sí, que las sedes diplomáticas nos daban un espacio para poder hacer puentes culturales.
There are different diplomatic places that give us space where we can make connections and establish different connections.
Es una forma también de apoyar la lucha que estábamos teniendo en Cuba.
It's a way for them to support the work that we're doing in Cuba.
En estas conexiones de trabajo comencé con el comité, con la organización Comité Ciudadano por la Integración Racial a trabajar.
Through these work connections, I began to work with the Citizens Committee for Racial Integration.
Que esta organización también defiende los derechos humanos
Another organization that defends human rights
y también los derechos de la mujer,
and women's rights,
enfocado en las mujeres afrodescendientes.
Focused on women who are Afro-descendant.
Negación, exclusión y represión es un informe sobre la situación de los derechos humanos en la población afrocubana.
Negación, exclusión y represión is a report on the repression of rights of the Afro-Cuban population.
Que se presentó en el 2017 a diferentes relatores con los 145 casos de violaciones de derechos humanos que sufre este sector.
This report was presented to different organizations in 2017.
Aquí están viendo a Cuba, una Cuba que tal vez no conozcan.
These are different images of Cuba, of a Cuba that you're perhaps not familiar with.
Estas imágenes son de asentamientos, comunidades que están en la periferia de la ciudad.
Images of peripheral communities on the outskirts of the city.
En estos territorios está presente la discriminación racial,
There's racial discrimination
las
in these
desigualdades
communities, inequality,
que sufren también sobre todo las mujeres.
suffered especially by women.
Viven en precarias viviendas.
They're living in very precarious homes.
Y las oportunidades que tienen para poder salir en desarrollo son mínimas.
Their opportunities to advance are quite limited.
El 90% de esta comunidad es afrodescendiente.
90% of this community is Afro-Cuban.
Nosotros hicimos un trabajo en estos territorios de incidencia política y social para poder hacer el informe Negación, Exclusión y Represión.
So we did a study in this community of political and social incidents, which then contributed to the creation of the report, Negación, Exclusión y Discriminación.
Y represión.
Represión. Sorry.
Ya. Entre las actividades también hacemos actividades culturales cuando podemos llegar a estas comunidades para los niños.
When we're able, we also do cultural activities, especially for the children,
Sobre todo fortaleciendo la identidad,
trying to develop their sense of identity.
porque hay también una ausencia de conocimiento en estos temas y se ha convertido como algo natural.
There's an absence of knowledge on these topics, and it's become something natural.
El vivir en esas condiciones, el no tener oportunidades, es como que lo que me tocó vivir.
Living in those conditions, accepting that situation, the attitude of this is what it is.
Porque no hay voluntad política de reconocer que en Cuba hay discriminación racial.
There's no political will to recognize that there is racial discrimination.
Estos informes que hemos podido enviar a los relatores de derechos humanos no han recibido aún respuesta tampoco del gobierno.
These reports that we've sent to different human rights organizations have not received any response from the Cuban government.
A nuestro regreso en el 2018, ustedes pueden ver diferentes fotos y esa señalización es que somos personas que no podemos salir del país en aquel momento. Nos pusieron una medida de regulado.
When we went back to Cuba in 2018, we were designated as people who could not leave the island.
Esta medida arbitraria no se te notifica cuando tú estás limitado o que el gobierno determinó que tú no salgas del país. No se te notifica previamente.
You're not even notified of these arbitrary measures.
Lo sabes en el momento exacto que llegas al aeropuerto.
You only find out when you get to the airport.
Por ejemplo, nosotros regresamos a Cuba en el 2018, agosto, y en noviembre yo fui invitada por una organización en Perú.
We returned to Cuba in August of 2018, and in November I was invited to Peru.
Red Defensora de los Asuntos de la Mujer, para recibir un taller de género.
By a network of
Red Defensora de los Asuntos de la Mujer.
In defense of women's affairs.
Para recibir un taller de género.
To give a workshop on gender.
Y cuando llegué al aeropuerto, después de chequear, me dijeron que yo no podía salir del país.
And it was only when I got to the airport that I was told that I would not be allowed to leave the country.
Pregunté a las autoridades aduaneras y me dijeron que yo era un caso de la seguridad del Estado, que estaba en un proceso de investigación.
I asked the customs officials what was going on, and I was told that I was being investigated by state security.
Por supuesto que nunca recibí respuesta, aunque fui a diversas entidades que atienden a la población con estos casos, a mí no me dieron ninguna respuesta.
Of course, I never received any kind of an answer, although I went to many different governmental offices trying to find out what was going on.
Esta medida también es tomada para que los activistas que salen invitados a eventos o a talleres decidan si salen, se queden, no regresen al país, es un destierro. Y si no, presionarte para que declines con tu trabajo.
These measures are designed to let activists know that if they leave the country, they're going to have to stay out of the country, or if they come back, then they're just going to have to stop with their activism.
Esto es otro de los talleres que hacemos en la sede. Este es la sede del Comité Ciudadano por la Integración Racial, y allí nos organizábamos para hacer también talleres para fortalecernos a nosotros mismos también.
This is an image of one of the workshops we do at the Citizens Committee for Racial Integration, workshops that we do for our own advancement and learning.
Comité Ciudadano por la Integración Racial también tiene un capítulo que se llama Red de Mujeres por la Igualdad.
This Citizens Committee for Racial Integration also has a group for
Red de Mujeres por la Igualdad.
the Network of Women for Equality, Racial Equality.
Y una de las acciones que hacíamos era también publicar Nuestras vidas importan, no más violencia.
And one of our actions was also to publish, to make these statements, no to violence, our lives matter.
Mi cuerpo es un territorio político.
My body is a political territory.
2019 al 2020 fue la represión más fuerte que sufrí en todo el tiempo que llevo trabajando como activista y defensora de los derechos humanos.
In all the time I've been working as an activist for human rights, 2019, 2020 was the period of harshest repression for me.
En el 2019 organizamos varias mujeres activistas que se relacionan con este tema para llamar la atención sobre la violencia de género, la violencia política que sufrimos las mujeres.
In 2019, a group of us got together to organize.
Nos organizamos
We got organized.
Para hacer una campaña
All right, to do a campaign for women's
para
rights
erradicar todos los tipos de violencia.
to try and eliminate all kinds of gender violence.
La campaña se denomina actualmente Unidas por Nuestros Derechos.
The campaign is currently known as Unity for Our Rights.
En realidad no pudimos hacer la campaña como queríamos.
In reality, we were unable to do the campaign as we wished.
Solamente pudimos hacerla a través de redes sociales.
We could only do it on social media.
Porque la policía política nuevamente nos reprimió, nos multó, a muchas nos llevó presa.
Because, again, the political police repressed us, we were given fined, others were arrested.
Por ejemplo, en mi caso fue un hostigamiento sistemático por más de 6 meses.
In my case, it was systematic harassment for over 6 months.
Incluso mi esposo y yo salíamos y a la que siempre la policía se llevaba arrestada era a mí. La policía me llevaba arrestada a mí. Salíamos juntos.
We'd go out together and I was arrested.
Esto, por ejemplo, fue un día que salimos y cuando sorpresivamente aparece el carro patrulla de la policía y me dice que tengo que entregarle mi identidad.
And this is one day when we left the house and the police showed up, and I was told that I had to turn over my ID.
Pregunto, ¿por qué? Me dicen, no tengo respuesta, solamente tiene que acompañarme.
I asked why, and I was told, I don't know why, you just have to come with me.
Mi esposo, cuando ve que me van a arrestar a mí, él inmediatamente también se monta en la patrulla.
My husband, when he saw that they were arresting me, immediately also got into the police car.
Pero a 1 kilómetro en marcha, la policía política intercepta a la patrulla, que es Policía Nacional de la Revolución.
This was the National Revolutionary Police, and after a kilometer, we were stopped by the political police.
Y bajan a mi esposo y a mí me llevan y me desaparecen.
And the political police got my husband out of the police car, and then they went off with me.
Digo desaparecida porque realmente cuando estos arrestos arbitrarios no te dicen no le dicen al familiar hacia dónde te llevan, vas hacia paradero desconocido.
I say disappeared intentionally because in these arrests, no one can know why or where you're being taken. Your family members don't know what has happened. No one knows what has happened.
Y nosotros tampoco tenemos oportunidad de hacer una llamada o una denuncia.
We have no opportunity to make a phone call or to make any kind of denouncement.
Por todos estos arrestos y cercos policiales, tuve también la solidaridad de la primera secretaria de la Embajada de Estados Unidos en Cuba en ese momento, Marateca, que se presentó en mi casa porque estuve también más de una semana sin poder salir con un cerco policial.
During all these arrests, I was supported by the First Secretary of the U.S. Embassy, Marateca.
Y en una de las desapariciones también tuve el apoyo de la embajada con todos los funcionarios pidiendo liberen a Nancy cuando estuve más de 27 horas desaparecida.
In one of these disappearances, I was also completely supported by the embassy who showed their solidarity with me.
Esta es otra de las campañas que hizo Artistas en Riesgo, una organización por nuestra libertad.
This was another campaign carried out by the organization Artists at Risk in our defense.
Y finalmente quería llegar hasta el 21, en el 2021, las manifestaciones multitudinarias que hubo en Cuba pidiendo libertad.
Finally, I wanted to get to the large demonstrations of July 11th, 2021.
Esto también tuvo represión.
These demonstrations were also strongly repressed.
Todo el que decida disentir va a sufrir represión.
Anyone who decides to dissent is going to be repressed.
Aquí vemos al pueblo con este cartel que dice abajo la dictadura, patria y vida.
Here we see the people with that sign, down with the dictatorship, patria y vida.
Actualmente en estas manifestaciones fueron 200 mujeres presas, hay alrededor en estos momentos de 50 mujeres en prisión.
After these demonstrations of July 11th, around 200 women were arrested and some 50 are still imprisoned
Por pedir libertad.
for asking for freedom.
Aquí vemos al padre él es opositor y ella dama de blanco, sentenciada ella a 8 años y el opositor a 9 años, también por apoyar las manifestaciones.
This is an image of one of the ladies in white and her father. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison and he was sentenced to 9 years in prison.
Y con esto quiero terminar que por reclamar la libertad te cuesta una cárcel, no solamente de 1 año, de 2. Aquí podemos ver jóvenes que están sentenciadas a más de 10 años y no hay ningún proceso que tú puedas hacer legal para tener justicia.
And I just want to end with this idea that it's not just 1 year or 2 years that you might be sentenced to, but you see here these young people getting prison sentences of over 10 years, and there's really no kind of appeal process or anything you can do.
Agradezco a todos por este momento que he podido compartir brevemente. Perdón la extensión. Espero que esto les haya dado a conocer un poquito más la Cuba actual en la que vivimos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you all for this moment. Sorry for the lengthiness, and I hope that you've been able to learn something about contemporary Cuba. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
We will now begin the question and answer portion of tonight's event. We hope that you will stay until the end, especially because we have the opportunity to share one of Jorge's music videos for all of you to watch. So because this event is being recorded, please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to reach you prior to asking your question. We do reserve the first question for students, and at this time, we are now looking for our first question.
Thank you so much for coming today to Dickinson. My question is that for many years, Cuba has been under this dictatorial communist regime that has committed so many atrocities against its own people. A lot of people before you have fought for freedom. The likelihood is high that many people after you will. So despite all the circumstances that seem at times very dim, what encourages you to continue in this struggle for the betterment of Cuba and her people?
Yeah. Well, it's, I think Cuba needs the efforts of so many people. We took the decision to fight for justice. I think it's very important to be part of this movement, this Pacific movement, to demand freedom for all people. We need to live and enjoy the human rights. We have had a political state during so many times, more than 60 years. For that, we consider we are making, we have many reasons to continue our fight for that. We had to live from Cuba, but here our mind is there in our homeland. From here, the United States, we continue our fight. A difference, but it's a compromise during whole life. It doesn't matter what place we are. It's a compromise with the Cuban people, all Cuban people.
We will now open questions up to the rest of the audience, students included.
Hi, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for sharing your stories. I just wanted to ask about, so obviously the US has had sanctions on Cuba for ever since the Cold War, and we tried to lift them in the Obama administration and reinstated them during the Trump administration. But I was just wondering, just say the US were to lift sanctions on Cuba, do you think that would in any way do you think that would help in any way with the political and economic strifes?
I think so. I don't think so. I don't think so because the principal problem for Cuban people is not the embargo. The principal problem is the blockade by the Communist Party. I am not say the embargo is a problem, of course. It caused some problems the Cuban people, but the main problem is the Communist Party. But, for example, all property in Cuba belong to Communist Party. No, there is not private property. All it belong to a state. I think it's the principal reasons for the big economic crisis we have in these times. For that, the principal demand of us is demand to the Communist Party celebrate free elections. We need to have different parties, different political parties, and the human rights, real human rights. We cannot express our ideas. It's very dangerous. For that, I went to prison my wife received so many punishment for that. I told you every day so many Cuban people are arrested and beaten and suffered different repression just for using the rights to talk, to say our truth. I think that Cuba must change. And independently, the other countries, for example, the United States I think insist the principal problem is the politic of Communist Party.
Unfortunately, we have no more time for questions, but we are incredibly honored to have both of these speakers here with us today. And as I set up the video, Jorge, would you mind saying a few words about the significance of the video?
My video, my songs, yes. And bueno, I am poet, writers and songwriter.